Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Roots Run Deep podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about food justice. And if you haven't had a time to listen to the first episode, go ahead and do that before you listen to this episode. We get into some introductions of the hosts. So today, we're going to be doing a shorter version of the intros just for you guys who are new listeners. So my name is Rafa. I am a Just Transition organizer at Urban Tilth, and I'm going to have my co-host introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kiara. I'm also a Just Transition organizer at Urban Tilth, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers.
And then we have an amazing guest today that is part of Urban Tilth, and I'm going to have themselves introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tania Jacobo. I am the farm stand manager. I've been with Urban Tilth for about 7 years and a couple months. I first initially started working with the farm team for literally 7 years. And last year in October, I transitioned to the farm stand team.
So if you want to tell us a little bit, how did you get into this work? How did you get involved with Urban Tilth?
So I got introduced to Urban Tilth through my dad. So in 2016, fresh out of high school, I didn't want to go to college because I didn't want to, waste my time in something that I wasn't really passionate about. I was still, soul searching, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my dad, who was helping at the time clean up the farm, he was like, you need to get a job, girl. So he introduced me to Doria. And when I met her the next day, I started working. And it's been history since then.
Awesome. If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been a Richmond resident?
I've been a Richmond resident for, I want to say, more than 15 years. I was raised in Richmond since I was young. It's been a while. I don't know the exact year, but it's been more than 15 years for sure.
Yeah, I feel like in the last episode we did the same thing where we kind of didn't know exactly what year it was. So we were just estimating around the time that we became Richmond residents. But yeah, welcome, Tanya. It's nice having you here. And so I want to talk a little bit about the program that you're in.
So I'm in the HEAL program, which from the HEAL program, we have different other programs. I am in the farm stand program.
And what other branches do you guys have in the HEAL program?
There's also the CSA program, which is the Community Supported Agriculture program, and the Veggie RX.
And you said you were in the farm stand. Do you want to go ahead and talk about a bit what farm stand does?
Yes. So the farm stand team, we focus on going to different areas of Richmond. We try to do a lot of outreach by basically getting people and introducing them to produce, organic, chemical-free produce. A lot of people who we go and meet at these farm stands, they're usually people who don't have cars, any transportation to really get to a grocery store. A lot of the areas where we are putting our farm stands, a grocery store is probably a 10-minute drive for a lot of folks. And so with that, a lot of them don't have a car. They walk a lot. They're seniors who don't, they don't have the transportation. So every farm stand, we try to be that resource for folks who also aren't able to find, chemical-free, organic, fresh produce. Because, again, the grocery stores are far from their location. And the grocery stores that we have in the area, they don't really provide the best produce. It's produce that's been exported from outside and filled with pesticides that not only does not provide the same nutritional value as something, but it's not fresh. And with that, we want to be able to be that resource for people where they can get free, healthy food. And it's been great because a lot of them have been changing their diet. They've been trying out new ways to cook different things. sometimes they can be a little hesitant on grabbing produce that they've never seen. But with that, we try to provide like recipes for folks to kind of like get inspired to use that and kind of, give them a little push like, hey, like you might not be able to know how to cook it, but try this. Maybe you'll like it. So we encourage them to try new things. And it's great because a lot of them are super excited about it. They look forward to it every day. All our locations, we have people already waiting for us. So it's great to like just see like the excitement of like, us putting the farm stand and them getting fresh food. And yeah, it's great.
So you said you have multiple sites. Do you mind sharing what sites you do the farm stands at?
So we have 4 locations. On Tuesdays, we set up at Crescent Park. On Wednesdays, we actually have 2 areas that go on at the same time. One of them is located in the Unity Park, and the other one, which is fairly new, we just started this year, we set up in Lucas Park. Thursdays, we go to the McLaughlin Baptist Church, and on Fridays, we set up at Parchester Village.
So how is that possible? How do you guys get the resources to actually give out this like produce to the community?
So, with a lot of help of the farm and farmers that we partner up, um, we tend to get a lot of the extras that they have at the North Richmond Farm. We also partner up with farmers around the Contra Costa County, even Brentwood, who provide some of those produce. And sometimes we even reach out to our CSA team whenever they have extra produce that they didn't pack. They tend to give that to us so we can provide that for them.
That's beautiful. So it stays local. That's what I love to hear, especially with the work that we do. A lot of the work that we do focuses around like sticking to our community and, being there at all times. So it's awesome to see that there's other programs within Urban Tilth that do the same thing we do, but in very different ways. Yeah, so that's beautiful. And sorry, going back to the way that you are able to provide the produce. You said that it was all local farmers. How are you able to actually make those connections from Urban Tilth to like the partnered farmers that are local, right?
Right. So the person who actually helps me to connect to the farmers are a procurement manager, as she is the one who has like the most connection to the farmers. Personally, I have not met a lot of the farmers, which we are hoping to do like a tour where we can go and visit the farmers who are providing the produce, because we highly believe that when we actually meet them and actually see a face to the name and actually get to talk more, the bond of like, the partnership gets stronger. And so I am very hoping that I can meet a lot of the farmers. I also connect with like the North Richmond farm team. They're mostly the main farmers that I connect with to really see what we can get from there, especially because that's like our center garden, the primarily garden where we can, like, we're like in the center of North Richmond, right? So I feel like that's like the place where a lot of people are excited to get their food, because it's like, wow, this is food that's being grown right in my community, like 2 blocks away from me. So I feel like people get super excited when I like specifically say like, oh, this is from the North Richmond farm, and then they're like, wow, like I passed by there, but I never go inside, and like it's great to see that like this head of cabbage was harvested 2 days ago from the farm, and they actually get more excited and they're like, I'm gonna go and visit. But yeah, we're hoping to kind of like strengthen our bond with the other farmers so we can be able to have a more understanding on like the produce that they're growing, the produce that we'll eventually be able to to get for farm stands as well.
You mentioned how some of our community members usually are hesitant to actually get some of the produce because it is kind of new to them. Have you ever faced like a time where you actually had to like show them like how to cook the food, or like do you guys do demos or?
So we are working on doing more demos this year because, again, I did start October last year, so there wasn't enough time for us to really organize and plan something like a cooking demo. But there is plans for this year where we do want to provide more demos for things that not only people can cook, but also for folks who don't actually have stoves and ovens, because we get a lot of people who don't have access to stoves. So we want to be able to teach and just kind of demo easy recipes that they can recreate to feed themselves and their families as well.
That's great. So kind of want to transition into the third section of our podcast, where we talk a little bit about how this is part of like environmental justice and how we contribute to actually being part of the Just Transition framework as individual groups in Urban Tilth. So I want to start off with the definition of what food desert means and kind of get more into depth of why the farm stand is so important.
Yeah, so Tania, you actually kind of touched on it a little bit earlier about how, like, in Richmond, North Richmond specifically, there's not a lot of accessibility to grocery stores. And I actually wanted to, before giving you like a formal definition, I wanted to ask like if you have any like, I guess, prior understanding of like food deserts, like if you can just like a one sentence or, you know, summarize like what you know about food deserts.
My understanding of a food desert is an area where there's no access to food. So that would mean grocery stores, gardens where people can go and actually get their own food, places where they have to go miles from their homes to actually get their food. So that's what I would consider a food desert. It's like within like the 10 miles radius of your home, and there's no grocery stores, no areas to actually get food.
Yeah, you basically got the definition of food desert like right on the nose. There's a lot of different definitions for the term food desert. So depending on where you find that information, people define it as being different things. Tania mentioned like the 10 miles. That is like the standard usually, especially here in Richmond, the city of Richmond. That's how like they calculate who is in a food desert and who isn't. But I pulled a definition from Wikipedia just because I felt like it kind of just summarized it the best. And they describe a food desert as an area that has limited access to affordable and nutritious food. So that's basically what we've been talking about, access and affordability being the two main issues with why people are in food deserts. Rather than just looking at it as like grocery stores, because a lot of times people think, well, there's a grocery store like a mile away, that there's no food desert. But as Tania mentioned, a lot of times there's a disparity with different food sources and different grocery stores depending on the area that you're in. Some areas that have higher income might have more access to these, you know, organic, fresh produce that other areas of lower income don't. And so I think food deserts doesn't necessarily mean that there's nowhere to get food, but it's also about the quality of the food and how easy it is to get.
With that definition and really looking at like the layout of our community, I feel like I see more of those like corner liquor stores, and you know, we actually have a crispy crunchy store by Fred Jackson Way, and how that is actually one of the main resources that I see my own community go towards to get food. It's more affordable than you could get like a meal for like close to like $8, and then for $8 you can only get like 2 avocados,
Right. And with that, I want to add as well that because of how scarce like healthy food is, when we do the farm stands and people never come to our farm stand, it's really hard for them to believe that we're giving things for free and that it's healthy, fresh food. Sometimes they're skeptical about it and they're like, oh, like, what do I gotta give? Like, do I gotta show my ID like in the other food banks? And like, they just kind of get nervous, and it's like, no, like, just give me your name and here's your bag. But it's kind of like giving people like a fear of like, oh, this is just too good to be true.
Yeah, I actually noticed that while the Just Transition team was supporting the farm stand, giving out like these tinctures, and they weren't used to us like being there, so when we were giving out the tinctures, they were trying to figure out if they were free or not. So that is something that I can see being like a barrier to our community, because going back to like the whole definition of the economy that we're in right now is very extractive. So it could be very hard to believe that everything that we're providing can be free, like natural medicines and fresh produce.
And plants, because we also give out plants. When there was just extra plants that the farm team hasn't planted, we try to take a couple extras for folks who, are starting to grow at their house. So it's been very exciting to like see how they also react to the free plants that we're giving.
And I really want to emphasize something that I talked about in the last episode, where it is hard for us to actually grow the food in our communities due to a lot of contamination that is caused by these major polluters. And I don't know, I kind of want to like hear a little bit about uh, how you encourage folk to actually take those plants and plant them at their own homes.
Right. Yeah. A lot of the plants, people think they need this acre land full of dirt and the sun. And it's maybe, yeah. But when you live like in an apartment, all you need is a window and a door that, if you have a frame with like the mosquito net or something that can still like provide some sunlight, anything can be grown in a pot if you play it right and really like think about like, okay, like let's say a bok choy grows as big as a lettuce, you need a pot, maybe like a 1 gallon pot. And so with that, like a lot of the people who like try tell us like, oh, I don't have a space, we do encourage them like, if you get a pot, if you find a window, that's all you need. Just give it some sunlight once in a while. You don't have to water it every day, once every other day. But it's something that I think a lot of people think it's so complicated, right? Because it's like a life that they're trying to take care of. Like the other day, we were doing a farm stand, and the lady was telling me, no, everything I touch just dies. I water it, it dies. I put it here, it dies. And she was just kind of explaining some of like the troubleshooting she was having where with the watering. She felt like she was watering it too much, so the plant ended up molding, right? She felt like she had to have it in a specific area with specific like sun and whatever. And she was just kind of bringing all these little things and saying like, just whatever I do, my plants die. And so I was trying to explain to her how, yeah, they need some love and caring, but it's also like you have to give it its space to grow, If we keep touching it, keep watering it, and keep kind of like stressing ourselves, why is it not growing? I feel like our energy kind of transfers to the plants in some way, where if you're stressed, plants stress. Because I don't think people realize, like, plants feel things. They get stressed. So I feel like when a person is just bringing all this, like, negative stress to themselves, it can go into the plant where they might be putting too much, too much water, let's say, because they're stressing that it's not growing. And it's like, just water it one time and just give it its space, so it can flourish. And just come every 2 days to check on it. But yeah, it's not rocket science, I feel like learning how to garden may be a little intimidating because, again, we are working with something that has life. And, that saying where people are like, oh, no, I can't be a parent because I can't even keep a plant alive. Mm-hmm. And it's like, think about it as yourself, right? If you keep feeding yourself, you're going to get sick, you're going to throw up, or your stomach is going to hurt. It's kind of like a plant. Don't overwater it. Just give it what it needs, and it's going to do its thing. So it's like we try to kind of encourage people to not, like, overthink it, right? Because it can be overwhelming for people who, again, have had the experience of, like, I keep planting and it dies. But, we don't try to force them, but we just keep encouraging them to try again, It's things of life. You don't want to give up. If you fall, you don't stay on the ground. You get up and you keep going. Just with the plant, try it again.
That's beautifully said. I think that that's very powerful within the work that we do. It's very important to keep thinking that way of, like, acknowledging this life form as a plant, but also as something that is pretty close to, we both have cells, we both need the sun, we both need water, we need food, everything like that. So I do think that that's powerful to keep encouraging people to continue seeing it that way. And that's also part of the Just Transition framework of always staying connected, building relations. There's, like, this whole part where it's, like, very sacred, where we keep stewarding things. It's not just about taking from the ground. It's not just about, like, oh, I need sage, let me just, like, cut it, and use it for myself only. You have to, as you take away, also give back to it, right? So I think if we continue doing that, like, nonstop, we're going to have that framework, like, pretty on lock, where it's all about regeneration and caring about each other.
Yeah, and patience. Patience is, like, number one when it comes to growing anything, from a flower to cabbage, sage. All you need is patience to really, give it its time to flourish to what it's going to eventually be.
I guess, yeah, I do have a question. I guess out of your experience, you kind of said, like, you've heard a lot about people, coming to farm stands because of a lack of, like, accessibility to cars or transportation. Like, would you say that that's the main reason that people tend to go to farm stands, or is it because it's, free, affordable to them? Or what would you say is, like, the main reason that folks tend to show up?
I feel like it could be a mixture of both. I think those could be two major things. One, it's free, of course, but also the transportation. A lot of the locations where we do the farm stands, the residents that live, like, a minute away from, like, the farm stands that we put. And in a lot of the locations, we are surrounded by a lot of senior homes where these folks don't have also the transportation, plus a lot of them are alone. We've met a lot of these participants who live in the senior homes that have talked about how their family are away, out of town, out of state, and it's just them. And so they don't have someone who can really take, like, who could really, like, take care of them in the sense of taking them to the grocery store, helping them cook or something. And the farm stand is literally the only place where they can walk and get their food. Because again, a lot of them are in wheelchairs. They have, their walking stick. So it can be hard for them to really travel far away from Richmond, North Richmond specifically. So with that, for them, it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to go so far. I don't have to, stress about finding a ride, finding how to get to this place. I can just walk here and grab this food. And, that's how they make their PM.
Yeah, that's so important, because I feel like a lot of times when we talk about things like transportations or making cities walkable, I think people forget that even if that is an opportunity that people can have, like there are people who still won't be able to use that, like you said, elderly people or people who are disabled. Like it's still a big monumental feat just to get to the place, and I think a lot of the times we take that for granted. And yeah, I really feel for that, because like I resonate a lot. My parents are both considered seniors, so like I'm doing a lot of caretaking for them, and things like taking them to doctor's appointments and to the grocery store for like this and that. And I luckily have a lot of flexibility, so I'm able to do that. But I know like there's people, like you said, who don't even have family members, friends, people who they can rely on. So it's really great that like you guys show up to them, like you go and you set up shop essentially in like their areas where they can come to you.
Right. Yeah, and we get a lot of parents as well who walk with like their kiddos, parents who have like 3 4 kids. And me myself being a parent, I know how hard it is to go to a grocery store to buy something when all you're thinking about your kids if they're running around. And so for them to just be like, my house is right here. I usually can't go to the grocery store because, one, I don't have a car. My kids don't go to school yet. I don't have the time. And for them to be able to just run out of the house and, like, leave their kids right there in their porch, and be like, okay, and then run back to their house. Like, it's something that they're like, oh, my gosh, like, so thank you so much for this. Like I was stressing about thinking, where am I going to leave my kids? Like, how am I going to get there? And so it's like, it's great how we can be that for them, that like haven of like, oh my gosh, like yes, like I was literally thinking about how am I gonna get this produce, but then you guys showed up, so thank you so much for this.
Coming from a background where, not knowing when was my next meal or anything like that, regarding food and living in a homeless shelter, sometimes I would get food poisoning, and it was because of, it would be food that's like canned, and sometimes you wouldn't know when the cans would expire, but that's the only thing you have. So I think it's very important to really keep doing the same thing of just building relations within the community. And like I said in the previous episode, that the people in our community are the only ones that know exactly what we need. And I think it's really important to just continue that.
Right. And adding to that, we at the Unity Park, we have a huge number of homeless, people who don't have a home. So with that as well, we try to provide produce that people can not necessarily have to cook. They can eat it raw. And again, with the recipes, because again, people don't have access to a kitchen, we try to provide these recipes where people can actually just make where they're at. Let's say like a little juice, a recipe for a juice, how to make it without a blender, how to make it without all these equipment, a salad, a fruit salad, something simple that people can actually make without stressing, where am I going to find a kitchen?
Yeah, it's very accessible for everyone, not just a certain group of people, which is very important. Because if we look at like where's the nearest Trader Joe's right now, it's like Cerrito, right? Yeah, so it's It's a bit of the ways out of North Richmond. So, and then just knowing that once a week we get to see the farm stand provide the produce that, you could get at Trader Joe's for free in your own community is very powerful.
Right. The stores that we do have that are closer to Trader Joe's, the produce is just, it looks sad, dull, you know. People might think like it's produce, it's fresh. But I don't think a lot of people realize how a lot of these huge farming companies, how much pesticides they put in their food, which lowers the nutritional value of these produce. So people might be thinking when they buy these things like, oh my gosh, I'm eating healthy. But eating an apple from a grocery store, that apple that's been, imported from who knows where, doesn't have the same nutritional value as an apple that was grown organically.
Yeah, I was actually cooking a soup with carrots that I got from Foodsco, and then also with some that I got from a farm stand. And the carrots from the farm stand were a lot sweeter, and they tasted way better.
The taste is different. Even the feel, like you can feel, like for example, like you're talking about carrots. Some carrots that you get from the store, they feel mushy, like they don't feel hard, like a carrot should feel, you know? And it's like you get a fresh carrot, and it's like, why is this carrot so vibrant and hard compared to this one?
Yeah, and I think the really like the important thing too about the nutrition is like that has like effects beyond just like, oh, I'm not getting like the nutritional value of this single like, I don't know, apple or whatever it is, like piece of produce. It like then has lasting effects because places where you already are struggling to get access to these foods, and then that is like the only option you have. If you're not getting the nutritional value that you need out of it, then like you said, it's kind of, you're just eating, but it's not really doing what it needs to do for your body. And then you get people who like have all these health issues, and it's like, even if they're following the diets that are recommended for them, or eating certain like nutritions that are like required to like help with certain illnesses or symptoms, it's not really doing the effect that it's supposed to be doing because it's being like watered down by these like these major corporations that like send their like best produce to the higher income areas versus lower income areas where we get kind of just the scraps.
Right. Eating the stuff with pesticides eventually, even though you're intaking small amounts, eventually that can cause like a ripple effect in your body where you start having health problems because you are ingesting those pesticides.
Like, it's just very extractive. Like, we think we're doing good for our bodies, but because there's these companies that are literally just focusing on getting profits out of like buying, it's just very common out here in Northern California where we have like vineyards, we have fields of like produce growing, but then you see like these big trucks pulling out of each farm, and it just being, for profits, and it's not really like stewarding the land. It's not like really building that relation with the land, but it focuses more on the whole profit side of getting the food out, and that's very extractive to us as well. It's like giving us like health issues when we could be potentially living for a longer time. It's cutting that time down to, it might be a small percentage, but it's still like dictating your lifestyle or your lifespan. Do you feel like there's like a lot of misrepresentation that could possibly happen within our communities when it comes to providing these resources to our community? Like, do you think that there's like people or companies that could potentially misinform our community with the produce that they're providing?
I guess in the sense of like the produce, a lot of these farmers who are growing for profit, they're not really being transparent with the way they're growing their food. And I think that's where the misconception of like, is the food that's coming to my house from the stores, is it actually healthy? Because again, people are not aware of the pesticides that are going into the food, the whole process, right? Saying fresh produce, but let's say we're in California, who people don't know, maybe things came from like Kentucky or I don't know, wherever they grow, you know? Yeah. Like they don't 100% know where their food is actually coming from and what the process was for that to get to their stores and then to their plates. And like the thing with us, even when I was working with the farm team, we were always super transparent of what we were putting on the soil, because again, with feeling like we're extracting, we always provided nutrition to our soil. So after, we never wanted to push the soil that we were working with to really be drained from its nutrition, right? So we would always try to build the soil again before we started to plant something, and then again harvest from that bed. And so with that, we try to be very transparent with people who come to the farm and even at the farm stands to let them know, like, look, like, this is what's going on. Like, this is how it gets harvested. It gets planted. Like, you know, we still giving it to our soil. We do cover cropping so it gets full of nitrogen, all these other nutrients that it's going to need, so it provides to the plant that we're growing at that area, you know? In other places, they're just, oh, fresh produce. But they're not really saying or telling the story of the produce itself, where it came from, how it was grown, and I feel like that's where the misconception comes from, where a lot of people don't, you know, they hear fresh produce and they just think everything is grown the same, distributed the same, harvested the same, but it's like, no, you know, things are done differently here because we're thinking more of the ways that we can still keep taking care of our land and our people.
Yeah, because you mentioned it briefly right now about like the covering the crops, and like I know a lot of people, when you say that we do it differently, we don't use pesticides and stuff, they're like, right, they don't really know what that means. So I don't know if you want to kind of explain, because I learned about that through Urban Tilth, so I don't know, I think it's cool to share.
Right, so there's so many types of pesticides around there, but again, like we don't use anything chemically produced. So if we are going, let's say, try to prevent aphids, for example, to reach our plants and take over them, our way of pesticiding, you would say, we try to do natural ways. So let's say we'll interplant plants that will actually repel these insects. So let's say I have a bed of kale, and then inside of it, or even the bed next to it, we'll plant flowers, we'll plant garlic, onions if it's in the season. We'll put herbs, some cilantro, parsley, things that are going to be very aromatic and, you know, eventually repel these pests into coming into our plants that are going to be distributed. We spray our plants. Usually if we see that something is being contaminated, we don't, you know, like, oh, we got to get chemicals. We literally spray the plants to shoo the insects and then hope for the best, right? Because we don't want to use any chemicals. So finding natural ways to repel these things is the way that we, in a sense, I guess, pesticide our plants. You know, but it's not really putting pesticides because there's no chemicals added to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool because it shows how, like, the small scale farming really gives you that ability to have that sort of, like, more holistic approach to things because, you know, it's not acres and acres of land that you're trying to do that with, which would require a lot of capacity from different people. This is like a very like small version of that. And I think like going back to how you were saying encouraging people to grow their own foods and stuff, I think it's like nice to see that that is a possibility. Like I know for me, I don't believe I have a green thumb at all. I'm kind of like that person who thinks everything I touch dies. But like hearing all this, it's like it really is inspiring and motivating. Almost like, oh, I can try. I can always try.
Yeah, especially with like the pest in a sense, right? Like we tell people like you don't need these chemicals to like repel. Honestly, if you're a coffee drinker, coffee grounds are super like a great way to repel invasive insects. Ants are like the number one culprit that will literally they like partner up with aphids. so anything that you can try and just repel ants will help you with like aphids, because the ants will literally harbor the aphids eggs, and the aphids feed the ants with all the juicy sweet stuff that they get from the plants. So they basically become like a partnership between them, where like, okay, take care of my eggs and I'll provide the food for you, type of thing. And so coffee grounds, cayenne pepper, garlic, peppermint. We use like peppermint organic soap, and we dilute it with water as well. Anything that's very aromatic. If you plant mint, lavender, so like things like that, companionship plants that will really, really help when it comes to like a pest. And so again, like at the farm, that's our like main way of, I guess, combating these pests, right? With planting a bunch of flowers, lavender, garlic, onion, whenever we have that, basil, anything that is super aromatic and strong like that, they don't go to it. And that's the way that's been helping us. And so when people are like, no, but then the insects are gonna get to it, like, just get a companion plant. It will do the work for you.
I feel like one of the main things that Urban Tilth is doing in North Richmond is kind of like creating this like reconnection with the land in North Richmond. North Richmond was known to be like the agricultural part of Richmond. And, if you wanted to still live in the city but not leave like your farm or, that lifestyle, North Richmond was the place where you would want to move into. So tying that back to Urban Tilth doing the work that we do is really kind of just reconnecting that, still providing food for our community within North Richmond, and it's beautiful. And just looking back at everything, how this podcast is called Roots Run Deep, we try to uplift that, that whole aspect of our history being a place to get answers from. I believe we talked about a lot of good things, providing for our communities and it being a community focused like organization, grassroots, and like I said before, the community knows what it needs. So we should be there, like at the forefront, showing up for our community. But yeah, without further ado, we're going to close this out with a question. Each episode, we're going to try to ask a question, and hopefully we can have the audience get involved in the comment section below. And of course, we will be answering that question ourselves here. So the question is, where do you get your food, your produce? Or if that isn't like a good question that you want to answer, you could also answer, how close are you to your nearest healthy foods market? And I'll popcorn it to Kiara.
I'll answer the first part of where I get my produce from. Usually, like I said, I do a lot of the grocery shopping with my mom, so we both kind of just like jump around. Like, we like to go to grocery outlet is like one of the places. La Loma on San Pablo, and I forget what the third one that we tend to go to a lot. Not Food. There's Food Max and there's Foods Co. Foods Co. Not Food Max. So yeah, those are. I would say I don't know exactly how far they are from where I live, but definitely like I think more than 2 miles away. So yeah, we usually drive there because that's just the easiest way to get to the grocery stores.
Definitely. Um, if you'd like to answer the question, Tanya.
Yeah, so I like to take advantage that we work at a farm. um, so I like to get the food from there, you know. There's extra, I mean, it's the healthiest you can get. So I like to take food from the farm if it's available. Um, but I also go to like grocery outlet. I think that's like the only store that I really try to go to. And if I'm looking for like specific produce that I'm not able to find, I go to Las Montañas because that's where I can really find like things that will be a little bit fresher, even though it's a little bit more expensive. Um, I do like to get it because it's a little bit more fresher than like if I go to like Foods Go. The produce there sometimes it's not looking the best. So those are the places where I will go, and I think for like grocery outlet is like a 10-minute drive from my house. Also, kind of like a mile and a half, 2 mile radius. And then yeah, to go to Las Montañas is also like another 10, maybe 15 minutes to get there. So yeah, go in my car as well since it's a little bit far from where I live.
Yeah. And for me, um, I am pretty new to like the independent lifestyle of like I recently moved out from living with my family to just me and my partner, and I feel like we have been experimenting on how to get our produce the best way. And like Tanya mentioned, I try to take advantage of the farm as well, and get my produce from there whenever I do have the chance. Uh, but sometimes I just go to the office and completely forget to get my produce. But I tend to go to Costco. We noticed that for like protein and like uh, a lot of like rice and a lot of the bulkier stuff, it's a lot cheaper to get it from Costco for us. And yeah, most of our produce does go bad sometimes, but um, those are the two areas I get my produce from. And if like there's like a random thing that we're missing, I do tend to go to Food Barn, which is on Rum Rail, and it's like way closer than a grocery outlet. But it is a little bit more scarce. They don't have a lot of the produce that we need, but um, definitely if like we're cooking food that's like more like around our culture, like I feel like that's the place to go. But sometimes it could be expensive too. But yeah, I kind of just want to fully close the podcast with any shout outs that you may have, or any events that you may be having, or like uplifting some of the things that you're working on right now.
I just want to encourage people to come and join us at the farm stands. We are really trying to make this year more educational, because, you know, even though we are there connecting with folks, we don't want to just be like, here's your produce, bye, see you next week. We want to be, I guess, not really teachers, but I guess just kind of teach more in the sense of like why, and like get them to know these facts so they understand more why it's important to eat more veggies, eat more greens, fruits.
So encouraging people to go to the farm stands. There will be a lot of educational stuff this year. You have anything to add, Kiara, before we say our goodbyes?
I guess I just wanted to like encourage our listeners, if there's anything you specifically want to see us like, having specific demos or like certain educational things that you might benefit from that we can like help support with, that would be like a great thing. If you want to like leave a comment or your email, or we have our different ways that you can get in contact with us, even just showing up to farm stand and chatting it up with Tania if you want. But yeah, just like, yeah, definitely want to like encourage people to just reach out to us and let us know what you want to see, because that's what we're here for. We're here to basically like, educate and like help the community. So we need the community to inform us on what we should be doing.
Right. Because knowledge is power.
Exactly. Yeah. With that being said, then, hope to hear the great comments or read some of the great comments that you leave down below. And yeah, this is it. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.